Hey guys, it's Kevin in the movie for you guys. I'm reviewing this is a movie that I was actually really looking forward to. I thought this movie actually did have quite a lot of potential, especially compared to the other releases that came out on this day. I thought this could kind of be the dark horse, so to speak, and I've finally seen it, and that is none other than the 1517 to Paris. And what the 1517 to Paris is essentially about is we center on these three friends. They basically are just taking a normal trip around, Europe, and they're approaching to Paris, and basically, while they're living their normal lives and everything, just randomly out of nowhere, this terrorist ends up on the train, and basically from there, the three friends have to take action and have to do what they can to stop this guy, and that's really all there is to say. So the 1570 in Paris in general, like I said, I was honestly really looking forward to this movie. I thought this definitely had quite a lot of potential. This was a story that I kind of was familiar with, but didn't really know a lot about. Obviously, I heard about the story of this, train attack and these, three first responders, and I thought that was definitely a cool idea, what was going to happen here. My biggest concern, though, was two things. One, Clint Eastwood, because he is a very hit-or-miss director nowadays. He can pump up something great, like American Sniper, or he can give us something really disappointing, like Jersey Boys, that was just very lukewarm and very forgettable. So I really didn't know how this was going to turn out, but also the fact that it wasn't professional actors, it was the actual people, that also had me very concerned, and I have to say, unfortunately, those complaints were pretty much warranted because while I don't think this is at all a bad movie, it is pretty unnecessary, and honestly, it's a film that really didn't need to be one. It's not at all, like I said, a terrible movie, but it's just a very, very mediocre film that could have been, I don't even know if it could have been that much more, but we're just getting into it right now, starting off with the cast. So, when it comes to the acting in this movie, I'm going to try to be as respectful as I can, especially given the fact that these are not seasoned actors. Like, these are not people who have been in films before, who know what they're doing, they've gone to acting school. No, these are just three guys who did this one incredible act and are now casted in this film. And I will say this, they are serviceable. I do think some of them do have legitimate potential. I think all three of them did work pretty well together. I mean, obviously, they are friends, and I do think they had pretty good on-screen chemistry, which was obviously real chemistry, and it did translate well on screen. I think they all did work pretty well together. Anthony Sadler, I honestly could see being a legit actor if he ever wanted to be, but to be honest with you, I don't think any of these guys ever wanted to be actors. This clearly was just Clint Eastwood put them in this movie, and now they're here. And like I said, they do what they need to do. They play the part they need to play. Nothing extraordinary. They do what they need to do, and I thought overall, they were okay for the most part. Really not much to ring home about, though. And then everyone else in this movie is kind of just fine. I mean, you got a really good cast. You got Judy Greer and Jenna Fischer, and they're both pretty much wasted. They don't really have anything to do here. Judy Greer's just Spencer's mom in the movie, who's helping him go through some issues. And Jenna Fischer, she's got stuff with her son in the movie, and they just, like I said, don't really have a lot to do here. And that really is what I have to say about the rest of the cast. There's really not much to say, because of the fact that the other roles in this movie are just very minute. Jaheel White, he doesn't really have a lot to do here. The rest of the cast, just very, very forgettable. Nothing really to talk about at all, and that's really all I have to say in terms of acting. Now let's get to the directing and the writing, because here's where we get to the biggest problem with this film. Like I said, it's really hard to get angry about these actors because they're not. They're just three random guys that Eastwood appointed to be in this film. And honestly, I think the biggest fault of this movie is Clint Eastwood himself. His directing here is just not very good. It feels very uninspired. It just really feels like he's going through the motions, and it doesn't really seem like this movie has an established tone. I mean, obviously, the last like 15 minutes or so, when shit goes down, yes, that part does have its tone, but throughout the movie, I just didn't really know what this movie wanted to be. Is it trying to be this coming of age film about these three friends? Is it trying to be this like character drama? Is it trying to be sort of like a military thriller? I mean, I could not tell what this film wanted to be. It's very all over the place, and it just does not work. There's a lot of attempts for humor in this movie, and many of them really do fall flat. It just does not feel very natural. It feels forced. It feels like it's there just to keep the viewer from getting bored, and it really does not work at all. But the writing easily is the biggest problem here. Why? Because, well, there's just not much here besides that specific event that I talked about. Other than that, there's not really much of a story here. I mean, there is, legitimate things that happen, like we see how the three boys became friends. We see, Spencer going through military training. We see them go on this vacation, but there's not really one specific story. So because of that, it's very hard to stay invested with this movie, because again, there's just not really much of a plot here, and it just doesn't really work in that regard. And a lot of people have said this, and I will very much agree. There is a significant portion of this movie that very much does feel just like a vacation film or a YouTube vlog. I mean, almost the entire third act leading up to that event is comprised of just seeing these two friends go to all these different spots in Italy and seeing them joke around and seeing Anthony take like a bunch of selfies, and it's just not interesting. It's really not. On a YouTube video, that's a different thing. You're clicking on that YouTube video because you just want to see some guys joke around, but when you're watching a movie, you want to see a story that's going to hook you in. You want to see something that's going to compel you, and this just doesn't. And again, it's not because the fact that, Eastwood didn't tell the story well. It's because, in my opinion, there just isn't really much of a story to tell here. I mean, the event itself lasts like 3 minutes in the movie. I mean, there's like 15 minutes devoted to it, but the event itself, I'm talking about the actual event with what actually went down, it lasts like 3 to 5 minutes. And, after that, the film pretty much becomes about that specific event. But again, that's when the movie's like almost over. After this attack, there's like 10 minutes left of the movie, and then it just ends. And up till then, there just isn't really a story here, and it just doesn't really work altogether. Now, I will say this. I mean, there are legitimate seeds that do connect when it comes to that attack. Like, for example, the film tries to factor in Spencer's military training and how he is equipped to, basically be ready for any sort of attack, and he knows how to handle himself in that situation. And yes, they do set that up pretty well. Like I said, it's just not a very interesting story, and there just really isn't a lot to it at all, and it just does not really work in that way. All the other characters in this movie, like Judy, Greer, Jenna, Fischer, they just have nothing to do. They're completely wasted. There's really nothing interesting going on with them, and I just really was not into it. And it's unfortunate because I will admit, the first, 30 minutes when it's just them as kids, I was actually somewhat into it. I was actually enjoying it. But then this random time jump occurs, and it just felt very jarring. And because of that, everything following that, it just left me very confused. Like, I felt like there was a significant chunk of this film that I missed, and it just didn't really work at all. And again, I think it just attributes back to the fact there just isn't really much of a story here. My best analogy for this is basically to say this. Look, there have been many times where I've gone to a movie theater and I have seen suspicious activity there. I've seen someone who just does not look very good, and they seem like they're going to harm others in the theater. And, I try to do what I can to get out of that situation. I might report it to a manager or whatever, or talk to someone at the theater. The difference with that is that you can't make a movie really about that. You can't, just because of the fact that I did this one specific thing and, you know, maybe prevented something from happening, it doesn't mean it warrants an entire film. And that's very similar to this. I mean, sure, what these men did are great. They really did a fantastic job, for sure, but again, there's just not really much of a story to tell here other than that last 3 minutes. There's not really much of a story, and it just really doesn't work at all. And I know I'm sounding repetitive, but that's just, like I said, it's the biggest problem with this movie. There just is not much of a story. The cinematography in this film, it's serviceable. Some of it does look like an Instagram video, I'm not going to lie. There are parts of this movie that really do feel like it was recorded on, like, Facebook or something like that. And I don't know if they were trying to make it, like, true to life or whatever, but it just didn't really work. I did not really think the cinematography was anything that great. The attack itself is fantastic. It's very well shot. You really do feel that urgency in that moment, and that whole scene was very well constructed. So I will say, the thing that we want to lead up to, the film absolutely does deliver in that regard. It's just the getting there that's very tough. It's very hard to stick with this movie. The score is whatever. There's really not much to say about it. I enjoyed the score, but there's really not much to say about it, like I said. The editing is pretty much all over the place here. It's very haphazard. There are scenes that go on way too long. There's a Skype conversation in this movie that lasts like 5 minutes, and you could have cut that scene entirely, honestly. That entire scene is just comprised of the three friends talking about meeting up. And the thing is, you know, if the whole movie would have been about the three friends and the bond that they have, that would have been a different story, but that's not really what this film is about. It starts off that way, but then the film becomes about Spencer's military training, and it just really did not work at all. It just did not really seem like it had a very focused story, and that also really does hurt the film for sure. Like I said, 1517 to Paris, it's not a bad movie, it's just a very forgettable one. It's a film that honestly I think we really could have done without. There's really no one who was clamoring for a film about this. Again, it's such a minute event. Sure, what they did is extraordinary, but there just isn't really anything that lends itself to an entire film. There's really nothing that says, oh, you needed to make a movie about this. I think honestly they could have just, you know, gone by, and Clint Eastwood clearly had, you know, was inspired by the story, and that's perfectly fine, but it just does not really work as a movie at all. I can see these guys becoming somewhat talented actors if they are interested in doing that, but from the looks of it, it does not really seem like they have expressed that much interest in being actors or anything like that, and I am going to give 1517 to Paris overall a C. So over, guys, my review of 1517 to Paris. Let me know what you guys saw of this movie overall. Loved your thoughts on it. Like I said, not at all a bad movie. It's just a film that I really could have done without. There just really wasn't much to it, and it is unfortunate because Clint Eastwood's a very talented director, but when he makes films like this, it just really seems like he's kind of running out of ideas, and I hate to say it, but this might be, you know, a incentive that maybe he should just retire and, you know, stop while he's still good, because he does still make good movies, but it just doesn't seem like he has many ideas left, and it just, like I said, isn't really working as much anymore. But that's in my review. Hope you guys enjoyed. See you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.